is Stopher Cavins. And Stopher is a psychic and medium, intuitive blogger, and oracle card reader, and did not realize or harness his intuitive abilities until later in life. He now offers psychic and medium readings through his website and blogs regularly about spiritual and intuitive topics. Stopher, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
You are welcome, Curry, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to get to talk with you. I always enjoy having people in your line of work on the show. It always, I think, makes for interesting discussion. And as always, true to form, I gotta hear the backstory here, man. How did this all happen for you? I know this has kind of been a long journey for you, and everybody kind of goes through a different journey here. I went through a different journey getting involved in the paranormal than most. How did this kind of happen or come about for you?
All right, so I'm debating if I want to tell you the extended story or cut straight to the chase. I think it's worth it, really, because I think there is a paranormal aspect to the extended story. So I'll try to put it into a nutshell. I wasn't born kind of knowing, seeing, hearing, spirit. There are some stories when I was young, some things I used to say that were a little interesting, I think, for my family, but for the most part, that was off for most of my life. I'm assuming a lot of it had to do with childhood trauma and stuff like that probably just like shut it down. But, I was always a sensitive kid and whatnot.
Sure.
In my early 20s, I joined the Navy, and which is a topic I blog openly about, being kicked out of the Navy during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, for being gay. So in 2002, I was being processed out of the Navy. It was early part of 2002. And I was stationed in New Jersey. And, I was waiting for my, everything to be processed so I could go back home to Indiana, after I was kicked out. And I was in a bar one night in New Jersey, and it was really strange how this happened. I was at the bar and I'm not a clumsy person, but I knocked a drink over onto a person standing next to me. Long story short, we became friends. It was just him and I are two totally different types of people, but for some reason, I think we were both kind of like, what's happening here? It was just a really odd connection, but we became friends. And over the next couple of weeks, we hung out a few times, and then it was time for me to leave New Jersey and go back to Indiana, my hometown. And so I told him I would, since I didn't have enough money to afford the Navy wouldn't even pay to have me like shipped back home because of how I was kicked out. It was so unceremonious, but I had to get a bus, like a Greyhound bus ticket. So I told him I was going to be at the Greyhound bus station. I was getting there early, and my bus didn't leave for hours. So it was near where he lived. And so I was like, hey, maybe you can swing by, pick me up. We'll have lunch. So that's what happened. He actually took me, we had some time, so he took me to his childhood home in, I think it was like East Rutherford, New Jersey, or Rutherford, New Jersey. Met his mom. We went upstairs. He was showing me around his room, and I was just kind of pointing out some interesting things in the room. And one thing was a bar that was kind of a few inches down from the top of the threshold that in the doorway that goes out to the hallway. So I made mention of the bar, that I thought it was weird, whatever. So he just said, yeah, my sister used to like do pull-ups on it when we were younger. It's always been there. And then next to that doorway is a square wooden plaque that had the letters of his name kind of glued in it was very fun and festive way, his name. And so I, pointed that out. I thought it was very interesting. And he says, oh yeah, this was my nursery. This is where I was, brought home when I was born, 20 something years ago. And that was on the wall, when I was a baby. So it was interesting. I was like, cool, whatever. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to be careful with the bar because I'm going to hit my head on them, very tall. And so he said he had to use the restroom. He went down the hallway to the restroom, and I'm just kind of waiting for him to finish. And I was pacing back and forth. And in the meantime, I was walking in and out of the doorway, and I hit my head on that bar. Not too hard, but it was hard enough to make a noise. And also the plaque that I mentioned jumped off the wall and onto the floor. So of course he's yelling from the bathroom, "What the hell are you doing?" And all this, wondering what's going on.
Hey, you called it.
I said, yeah, all those things I said were going to happen just happened. He said, okay, we'll put the plaque on the bed. It wasn't broken or anything. And that was that. We ended up leaving. I got on my bus, went back to Indiana. Me and him remained friends. And over the next couple of weeks, we were talking on the phone every day. I'd call him, when I was between jobs or whatever. And he calls me, he says, this is really weird. I got to tell you something that's very, very bizarre. And he was like, are you sitting down? I'm like, dude, what can it be? Come on. And so he says, so he kind of relives the moment, like, you come in, you mention the bar, the plaque, all this stuff. And he says, then everything happens. And he goes, I went to put the plaque back up on my wall today. And he's like, we met in a very weird way. You tell me you're from Indiana. I don't even know where that's at. I couldn't even point to it on a map. Like, he's just like going on and on and on about how he has no connection to any of this. And it's just all weird. I was like, okay, dude, get to the point. And he goes, well, I'm putting it, and I'm from a place called Evansville, Indiana, specifically. Very small, kind of semi-metropolitan city. And he says, I'm putting the plaque back up on the wall. And I look at the back of it. He goes, keep in mind, it's never been off the wall in 20 something years. And it's hand painted on the back that it was made at Arbor Hill House. We're at Evansville, Indiana. So
Wow.
it just really confirmed. And keep in mind, I was going through a lot of turmoil at the time with, what had happened in the Navy, and life was I just didn't know if I was where I was supposed to be. And so he had told me that he had already asked a psychic about it. And she said that really just confirms that we were supposed to be friends. We were both where we were supposed to be at that time. That energy would just exploded, and that thing jumped off the wall because, of the energy that I had from that city. And I found out later that my grandmother used to work at that place that hand painted those crafts. So it's very possible that my own grandmother actually created that piece of art.
Wow.
Fast forward to August of 2020. We remained friends this whole time, and keep in mind, we are two very different people. So the fact that we remained friends, I mean, I think we were both like, what's going on here? But we cared for each other. We always checked on each other. We would meet each other in different locations throughout the years. He calls me August of 2020, and he says, and he knows that I'm a marketer. I've been in marketing for a long time. He says, hey, I'm starting a business, and I want you to check something out. So he sends me to his Facebook business page that he created, and he wanted to see if I could help him. And the business happened to be that he is a spirit medium. And so I was like, I think in 18, 20 years, we had one conversation that he sees and talks to dead people. And so it wasn't that weird for me. And so I was like, yeah, this is great. Let me help you, create a website and get you on Google and blog and all this stuff. So basically that's what happened. And I started helping him, and I really kind of, and all this was fairly foreign to me. It wasn't something that I didn't have a bag full of crystals and tarot cards and stuff like laying around like I do now. So it was kind of foreign to me. I wasn't saging my house every day. So I just learned about it, and I was picking his brain. I was helping him with this marketing. And then basically, long story short, my life changed. Spirit took the opportunity that they had set up 20 years before with this meeting with him and I, to take that moment to let me know that this is what I need to do. So I started I started meditating. I started doing all these things, working with crystals, just sitting in the power, doing all these different exercises. And I started connecting with my own loved ones in spirit. And then I started, doing oracle card readings for people. And it was just amazing, the messages that were coming through and the amount of healing that I was able to do for people. And then I realized that was my calling, and it was what I felt like I had to do it. So here we are today. And I really do believe it started back then in 2002.
Stopher, it sounds like you went through kind of a lot of trauma with the experience you mentioned with the Navy and everything. Did that kind of help with your healing process as well, all of this? I mean, you're helping other people, obviously. That kind of helped you heal through all that as well?
It really did. And the trauma happened before that, and I already had abandonment issues. And then the Navy just, took their role in my abandonment issues and kind of solidified that even more. So, yeah, after that, I just continued to try to heal on a human level and compartmentalize things and all that. But once I kind of got more connected spiritually, I saw things from a completely different perspective. So I saw it more from a spiritual perspective, that it's just something I had to go through, and it was just a part of the story, right? So it definitely helped me heal, and even some of the other stuff that happened in my childhood. I've been able to heal through communicating with spirit, connecting with my own spirit. It's been transformational.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the experience with the Navy and everything you went through with that. Now the policy's changed, obviously. People have opened their minds and such. I'm retired military. I'm retired Air Force, actually Air Force Reserve. I did over 12 years active duty in that stretch, 25
Nice.
years total. The military's changed their policy on that. How has that have you kind of had mixed emotions about that? About the situation that happened with you and kind of where we're at now with policy wise and everything with the military?
Yeah, it was hard. It was, I had a lot of shame for a long time. Not so much about, being gay. I mean, I kind of dealt with that. There was a process. There was a whole, metamorphosis there. But, with what happened in the Navy, I didn't have veteran status. I'd given, over 2 years of my life, being away from my daughter when she was young. And that's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to ask of anyone. And it would have been more, right? But I always had shame. Like, I wouldn't stand up at the ball games when they would say veterans stand up to be recognized. I wouldn't stand up because I wasn't technically a veteran. I didn't have access to the GI Bill that I was promised. I didn't have access to VA loans, none of that. So yeah, it was hard, but I'm glad that there's been progress. And over the past year and a half, I've kind of come to terms with getting back into it to where I can get my discharge upgraded. And because I just kind of put it out of my mind for so long, didn't want to deal with it. It wasn't really that big of a deal to me. But then finally I did. I got my discharge actually just a few months ago. I got a letter in the mail saying that I'm now honorably discharged.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So I've kind of come around, and that's part of the healing process too, is just kind of dealing with things that you kind of, normally would stick your head in the sand and not want to deal with and not want to like take on. But spirit has really kind of helped me do all these things that I probably wouldn't have done in the past.
Yeah, and let's go back as well. Now, you talked about the experience that kind of brought you into this with your friend. Mm-hmm. Any other strange experiences when you were younger? Perhaps you repressed or just kind of shut off that you can remember. Any kind of strange experiences that may be borderline paranormal?
Yeah, the only thing is my mother would tell a story, and I've heard this story several times, and even when I was younger, that I would say things. I had a great grandfather that passed away probably a few years before I was born, and so of course he was a great guy, and they would always talk about him. And I would be probably like 3 years old at the most, and I would say things like, "Oh yeah, I knew him," and this and that, and then they would of course like redirect and say, "Oh no, he passed before you were born," and this and that. So I would say things like, "Oh no, I knew him in heaven." And, I'm sure kids say that. And then I would give them some details about him, about him smoking a pipe or him, just some very specific details. And I would hear them say like, it really freaked them out. And now having that connection with him in spirit, I do believe that we were connected before I came to this world, just because of how I feel that connection with him now. So I do know that I knew him before.
Yeah, that's interesting. So any family members that have talked about any kind of psychic abilities or anything along those lines?
Yeah, my auntie Deborah, who's now in spirit, she passed in 2014. She is one of my guides. She was a tarot card reader. She went by the moniker Moon Queen. So she's been instrumental. We were very close when she was here, and I feel like since she's passed, and since I've had this kind of spiritual awakening, we're even closer than we ever were. So I talk to her daily. She sends me all kinds of messages and signs throughout the day. So I mean, it's really uncanny. It really is. But yeah, and beyond her, I don't know of anybody else in the family that kind of had the gift or the ability, if you want to call it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you've kind of come across this later in life where some have experienced it quite frequently at a younger age, and perhaps they turned it off because family members told them, "Hey, you're not supposed to do that," or that it just was a taboo subject, I think, for some to even delve into with family. And so they kind of just, other psychic and mediums who I've had on the show or have talked about it, have kind of talked about this process of repressing it, turning it off, just, kind of forgotten about it, if you will. Even though they know it's kind of still there, it was just kind of one of those subjects they didn't want to broach or bring up around family members. For you, when you did start doing this, and you started realizing that this is real and that you do have this connection with spirit. Talk about that process and how that kind of unfolded and how that kind of affected you.
Okay, as far as like the dynamic with the family or just in general?
Just in general, when you're actually interacting or having these experiences where you have connection with spirit.
Yeah, I it's interesting because it didn't faze me and like it didn't shock me. It was something that I always believed in. I think I was never in a place where I was comfortable doing it or where I could really like hear spirit because I was just so clouded with my own ego and my own protections. So I got to tell you, it really changed my life. And I want people to know that on at least some sort of level, anybody can connect with spirit. Spirit's constantly during the day, just throughout the day, giving us messages. They want to communicate with us. So of course, some of us are able to do it a little bit more clearly than others or understand it better. But it changed. I mean, it completely changed my life. I tell people if you would have met me like 2-3 years ago, you probably wouldn't have liked me because I was just so driven by my ego and I needed to protect myself from getting hurt or from getting involved in somebody that was going to make me look bad. And so I was just always like putting myself in this like word prison and connecting with spirit and just knowing that there's more out there and that we're not really in as much control as we think we are has really just allowed me to shut up that ego and just live life and connect with other people. And that's really what this line of work is about for me is just the connection, even connecting with you or anybody in this way and being vulnerable is something that I never would have allowed happen in the past. Just because I was afraid of being hurt or to, made to look stupid or whatever it is. So yeah, life changed for the better. My relationship with my husband got better, everything, just happiness in general.
Yeah. And so I kind of come to this from a different angle. I mean, obviously in the paranormal and doing paranormal investigating. And if you had asked me, I would have been involved in this stuff 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, no way,
Right.
And even being open to psychics and mediums and all the other things I kind of delve into, I would say minus the UFO topic, because I've always had interest in that for, a very long time. But it has helped open me up to all these other subjects doing the show, having all the different guests on, and exploring all these kind of interesting topics has opened my mind to all this. But talk about like when you do reading stuff, or how do they typically work, and how do you go about kind of doing especially, I mean, I imagine a lot of these are online. How does kind of a typical reading go for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I'm doing a mediumship reading, It's interesting, and I told a client this the other day because their loved one actually showed up before they booked the reading. So I do believe that spirit brings me the client, or whoever's coming to me. I believe that spirit's kind of the one that initiates it, not the reverse, which is the client books and then spirit shows up. Um, so usually whenever there's a booking or somebody, I know somebody's wants a reading with me, I'll start getting knocks on the door, which is basically just knowing that spirit's around and they're excited for the opportunity, whether it's tomorrow, it's happening tomorrow, or a week down the road. They'll just let me know I'm ready. So it's interesting because and it helps me because I know like I'm not going to show up to the meeting and then no spirit. So they let me know, and they let me know ahead of time that they're going to be there too. Um, and they usually don't, it's not a situation where I'm bugged, like I hear them like the whole week or something. They just let me know they're coming. And then once I show up, I kind of have rules that lets me know, and it really lets me know that like who spirit is. So if it's a female, I ask them to, kind of tap me on the left side. And if they're male, the right side. If they're a member of dad's family, on the right side. If they're a member of mom's family, on the left. And then I kind of can feel, if the energy is up, that means that it's like a parent or a grandparent. If it's like in the middle, that tells me that it was like a contemporary or a cousin or a sister or something like that. And then if the energy feels lower, then of course it's either like a pet or it would be like a child or something. So I've got these little cues and these little understandings with spirit of how they come in and how they kind of let me know who they are and that they're here. And then from there, it's just kind of like a full body experience. So they're just kind of giving me feelings and sensations, and I'm hearing things in my mind, and then I just have to kind of translate it, which I've worked very, very hard to kind of understand what those different things feel like. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, do they come like sometimes in images? Do they actually sometimes do you verbally hear their voices, or is it kind of a mixture?
It is a mixture. I don't hear the way that you and I are speaking. I don't hear, external kind of sounds. I can hear things kind of in my own, mind's voice. And then also, yeah, it's a feeling, it's a knowing, and then also like kind of a seeing. I don't see as much as far as like in my mind's eye. That's not mostly how I get messages. It's more so the hearing and the feeling.
Yeah, and do they? That's interesting because I had a lady on the show a while ago. I don't know if you're familiar with the term EVP, electronic voice phenomena. But
Yeah.
yeah, she actually had been communicating with her. Her daughter was in a car wreck, passed away at a very young age, at age 20, and she actually eventually was able to reach out and communicate with her daughter through EVP. Now, it was often messages, one-way messages coming from her daughter, or her daughter would communicate something through EVP to confirm something either she was doing or something she had asked about. It was quite interesting, but I think the thing for me is there's probably a number of different ways this could happen or how they could reach out to you. You know, do they reach out to you through voice, through messages, through I think most people have had some sort of synchronicities, and I'll give you an example. I lost a pet when I was in high school. A dog of mine got hit by a car, and I was driving home from work, and this just happened a few months ago, not too long ago. And I was thinking about my dog, and the moment I had that thought, a second later, I look up, and the car in front of me, the sticker says Wild Wiley, and my dog's name was Wiley. And it was
Nice.
literally a split second after I had just had that thought about my dog, and there it was. So, I've had a few synchronicities like that, and you often wonder, are those messages from spirit or from, your pet or your loved ones?
Yeah. How could it not be, right? So you're just, here's what I say to you is that that's confirmation that Wiley is with you almost always, right? Probably just like they were when they were here on Earth. They probably followed you around, and so they're doing that in spirit. And then when they knew that bumper sticker was in front of you, they gave you a little tap, right? And so you have that thought, and yeah, that's your own thought, but that's spirit kind of making you or kind of nudging you to think that, and then you look up so really they're just taking the opportunity to let us know that they're here, so those synchronicities, when they're there for us to see, spirit's going to tap us. I believe that 100%.
It's bizarre. It really is. I wanted to ask you now, do you think spirits sometimes may, now I lost my mom to cancer a couple of months ago, and obviously so still kind of dealing with the grief of that.
Yeah.
Do you think sometimes maybe they take the appearance of, say, I don't know, a dragonfly, a butterfly, anything like that? I've heard people talk about that before.
Yeah, that's a good question. And first of all, sorry for your loss. I know that's tough. In 3 months, of course, you're still kind of going, processing and whatnot. But with the dragonfly and the butterfly is, it's kind of the same thing as what, Wiley did is I just think that they take opportunities. I don't personally believe, based on the connection I have with spirit, I don't personally believe that they are manifested in that butterfly or that dragonfly. But I do think that they take the opportunity to make that connection. So when a butterfly or dragonfly or feather on the ground, whatever it is, they're gonna tap you, and then when you see it, they're going to connect it, and then you're gonna have that thought, and it's gonna just bring them to life in your heart, and you're probably gonna smile, and so that's what's happening there. So those aren't coincidences; those are spirit speaking to you. So when people say, "Oh, spirit doesn't speak to me," I say baloney. Of course they are.
Yeah, no, Stopher, you talked about that spirits are kind of almost like arranging these readings sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because the lady I just spoke to you about, who was getting messages from her daughter, the group that she was working with that were doing this EVP work were basically suggesting that this group on the other side were coming together to try and make this communication happen.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of hers who was in the group would get a message that she thought was coming from her daughter. And in turn, sometimes she would get a message that perhaps was coming from her son, who would also. So it was a group of people that had experienced loss, daughters, husbands, wives, and they all were experiencing grief. But it was interesting because there seemed to be a connection, and they seemed to be communicating with other members of the group and sending messages. So it's really interesting that you say they kind of orchestrate this sometimes, because that's kind of what she was indicating as well.
Yeah, I think they orchestrate more than we know. I've received messages, even I get asked a lot during like psychic readings, about love. Is love coming in for me, and are these things going to happen? And spirit, whether it's the person's guide or whether it's a loved one, they'll let me know that it's either being worked on or it's going to happen, and sometimes I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, and that information isn't always there, but what I feel is that they're telling me that they're kind of pulling some strings, kind of energetically trying to get things to line up a certain way. So I do believe that there's a lot happening on the other side that we'll never understand until we get there. But yeah, they're working hard. I know that.
So now you get the sense that sometimes because we all want to get messages from loved ones that passed on. I'm going through this with my mother, obviously.
Yeah.
And do you get the sense that they are trying hard, but are actually experiencing the same kind of difficulty as well and trying to reach out to us?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I guess I don't know from their perspective, but I mean, they're never going to stop. I know that. I know they're happy to, that's I guess what it's all about once you get to the other side is really just trying to continue to connect the world, and just get everybody to kind of connect through love and light, right? So yeah, I just think it's a process. We got so much going on here, and I think we've come a long way. Even in the last 2 years with the pandemic, I think has really kind of brought down some of the difficulties we have connecting spiritually. So Spirit's just going to continue to try to reach out. They're going to send us those synchronicities. They're going to, flicker the lights. They're going to do whatever it is they need to do to let us know. So, yeah, that's the challenge, right? Getting lined up between our human vibration and then the spiritual vibration.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because I've heard that talked about a lot with people in spiritual work about vibration and how perhaps spirit or higher vibration than us. What's kind of how does that kind of impact our interaction with them, the vibrational kind of energy we have or bring?
Yeah, it's basically the difference between being on the same level as spirit, and I don't love the word vibration. I know we use it in the spiritual community as kind of the way to say, like, getting on the level of a spiritual level. I think of it like this: is like, have you ever had an opportunity where you could help another human, you could or even an animal, where you just were selfless, you were able to give to them, you were able to help them out, and then you saw how happy and healthy it made them. Think about how that made you feel, right? You were like, because that's the essence of who we are, is the love and the giving and just the pure joy and light. That's what we're here for. I truly believe that. So when we're able to do that, that is, quote, a higher vibration that we're on. Because so to me, that's when we're closest to spirit. When we're in a true selfless, loving, giving moment, that's when our spiritual, quote, vibration is the highest. And that's when we can accept these messages from spirit, or even just energy from other people. That's when we're the most receptive, when we're in that state of vulnerability and love and joy and giving and all that stuff. So that's what I take as vibration, high vibration. And then when you're kind of down in the dumps and you're not feeling like giving, you're not feeling like you love everybody, that's a low vibration, right? And then you're probably less likely to be able to understand what spirit's saying when you're in that kind of yucky place.
So yeah, when we're kind of, the focus is all on it, and you talked about that a little bit before you got involved in this work, how it was kind of ego and the focus was on you and everything. So when we're kind of, hey, me, woe is me, or everybody's against me, or kind of this lower state,
Right.
that really kind of hurts our chances, from what you're saying. It sounds like, of kind of interacting. Is that correct?
100%. Yeah. And that's how I lived most of my life, was just that very guarded kind of lower vibrational place. And I read a book. I'll give a lot of the credit to this book. And I know a lot of people in the spiritual community have probably read it 10 times before I even knew about it. It's called The Untethered Soul. And the author is Michael Singer. And it's all about quieting your mind, creating balance in your life, the importance of death, how it makes life valuable. It's a really great book. So The Untethered Soul really changed how I think about my own ego. It really just kind of let me realize what it was and what was controlling my kind of my low vibration.
We were just talking about the book. Can you mention that book again, Stopher, that you said was a great read?
Yeah, so it's called The Untethered Soul, and the author is Michael Singer.
Great. I wanted to ask, so you talk about you don't really have voices talking to you at night. I know some people involved in that work, they say, they just have to turn it off sometimes. But it sounds like you really don't experience that. I mean, you don't have spirits talking to you at night, keeping you awake at night, that sort of thing. Or is it just you're able to kind of tune it out?
I always tell people, I'm different than a lot of mediums that I talk to that tell me like, oh, I can't go into home goods because there's just so much energy coming at me, and when I go into public, I've got spirit like tapping me on the shoulder. That is not my experience, and it probably has to do with kind of how I live my life being kind of shut down. So my default is off. So I'm kind of the opposite. I have to work really, really hard and set some pretty serious intentions for when I'm going to read and when I'm going to get in that space. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword because I don't have to deal with spirits, talking to me while I'm trying to sleep or, kind of intruding into my dreams. I don't experience that. But when it's time for me to get in that space, I do have to work pretty hard to turn it on.
Yeah, so it sounds like from what you're saying is that you've kind of developed this ability. Now, that's the other interesting thing about psychics and mediums. Now, do you feel like some people, okay, so let's liken it to someone who has music talent and they can easily, they have good tone, they can easily learn to play the piano or whatever other musical instrument. Do you kind of liken that also to some people are kind of just naturally gifted as psychic and mediums, or do you think it's just something you learn to develop?
Yeah, I think there's a range. Excuse me. So just like my friend that I was telling you about that, kind of led me into this, or we were led together so that we, could both have this journey. He, the faucet was on when he came out of the womb, so he was open to spirit from jump and, shut it down for a certain period of his time. But really his default is on. And he's very well developed and he's amazing. For me, it's something I have to work, I've worked very hard to learn the ability and it's something I work on constantly. So I think just like, the analogy you gave, which was, being, musically inclined. I mean, could I play the piano? Sure. Will it be great? Probably not. It's just not how I'm built. Can I
Right.
do it? Yes. Or, with running, can I run? Yeah. Most all of us that aren't impaired can run. Does it mean we're fast? No.
Yeah.
So,
So
so you've got that level, of course.
sure, that makes sense. So, there's a lot of people obviously want to learn how to kind of hone or learn these skills. What say you about ways that people can kind of work to try and hone these or develop these skills as you have?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways. And I think it really starts with, because I say that I'm a vessel, so I'm just basically carrying water for spirit. So I need to make sure, first thing is make sure your vessel is clean. Make sure that you are, you've dealt with your traumas. Make sure you're operating at a high vibration. So that's the first order of business, is just to make sure you're in a good spot. Because you don't want to start reading other people or connecting with spirit if you're kind of in a yucky place. Then the next thing is to start the development of getting that connection. So I started with doing some online Zoom courses with some local mediums here in LA. They're usually like 4 to 6 week courses, once a week. They put you in breakout rooms. You practice with other developing mediums. They give you some tips and this and that. I've done them in person. I've done them on Zoom. And then there's practice circles. Most of them are free. I operate one on Tuesday evenings, LA time. That's completely free, and people come from all over the world, and we get together and we practice. So those are just some different ways, but it's a nonstop thing because I'm always learning how to deepen the connection or how to better interpret what I'm feeling. So that's just some ways, and of course YouTube has a lot of resources as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned meditation. Talk about how that kind of comes into play.
Yeah, for me, meditation was mostly about the quieting of my mind because it's hard to hear spirit when you're talking over it, right? So that's just a really good kind of way to learn how to get quiet and put your own, like, I call them lists, all your daily lists and things that are going on in your life, and learn how to like put those down. So that's mainly how meditation kind of helps me raise my vibration, because then I can put down some of the yucky stuff. And then the exercise that really helps you learn how to connect with spirit is called sitting in the power. And that's where you really visualize just opening your heart and your light and connecting it with the light of the universe, and just sitting in that kind of really beautiful energy, whether it's for 5 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. And you're just really kind of interacting with that light, and feeling it and understanding it and just becoming one with it.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about it. You know, obviously, I'm involved in the paranormal. Been doing paranormal investigating for a number of years. You know, I use equipment. A lot of times it's audio, voice. You know, it's digital voice recorders. We've captured a lot of interesting EVPs, voices coming through. This gets into kind of the idea of what is a ghost, and kind of everybody seems to have a little bit different idea of that. You know, what's kind of your idea of what a ghost would be and how they're interacting with us?
Yeah, I feel like a ghost is probably a pretty powerful energy. And I do believe it's likely somebody who was formerly in human form. Although I guess maybe that's, doesn't have to be the case. I'll go with an I don't really know right there. But, I do believe it would have to be, I'm thinking, a pretty powerful energy to manifest in some of the, ghost-like ways, of either being seen or heard in those ways. So I just really think it's a strong energy that was likely a human, just manifesting.
Yeah. Now, do you get the sense, though, Stopher, that sometimes it's people just kind of hanging around after they pass away, or do you get a sense that there are people are just kind of lingering and don't want to move on? Because there's a lot of talk about that as well.
That's an interesting question, because I feel like the way I feel energy and spirit is, I don't necessarily feel like spirit is like a human in the way that they're in one place at one time. Because I believe, like my grandmother in spirit, I believe she's with me right now. I believe she's also with her daughter, my grandmother. This is my great grandmother I'm talking about, and she's with other members of the family. And I believe, her energy is multiple. It's in a lot of different places, and it's manifesting in different ways. So I think it could be that a person's energy or part of it is just still manifesting or still kind of hanging around. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're only there. You know what I'm saying? So I think sometimes it gets a little stuck, or it's just connected to something and it hasn't been cleared. But I truly believe that if we own something, like we own our own energy, or if we own like a house or whatever it is, we have control over clearing the energy. We don't need a shaman to, we don't need to pay a shaman $1,200 to come in and clear it. So we have control over the things that we own, whether it's physical or whether it's our own energy.
So is a lot of this kind of dealing with the power of intention?
100%. It's extremely powerful. It's more power, and I think that's a good message for everybody listening. Is when we set our intent, we don't realize our own power. We don't realize our own magic. Just in setting intentions and wanting something and desiring something to happen, I believe it's likely going to happen. As long as it's coming from a good place. So intentions are extremely powerful.
Yeah, and going back to spirit, deceased loved ones, do they? I don't know. Some people seem to think maybe they just kind of move on and forget about us. Does that happen sometimes? Do they just, they're in a better place and they kind of move on and forget about us?
I don't think it's quite like that. I've had experiences, for example, my own father, who's in spirit. I don't feel him around a lot. But also keep in mind that he wasn't here. He wasn't around a lot when he was here. But he hasn't forgotten about me. He does come in, when I call him, I am able to connect with him, but his energy is not super close all the time. That does not mean that he has forgotten about me. It just means that his spirit knows that I don't need anything from him. I don't need, there's no guilt that I need to release. what I was saying about, and my dad and whether spirit is, could forget about us. I don't believe so. And I believe that when we connect with another human, whether it's for a good portion of our lives or whether it's just, like us being on this call for an hour or so, we are connected. It's almost like there's a spiritual like DNA that's connected. So, whether it's just like a passing someone on the street, we're all connected in that way. So it's amazing who comes through when I connect people with people from the other side. It's like sometimes their neighbors come through. Sometimes people that they don't even think about come through with a message. So I don't believe that they can forget about us.
And do you find a lot of people are surprised when they do readings with you? Do they walk away kind of surprised oftentimes?
Sometimes, but most of the people that are coming to me, they're usually not skeptics. So and it's a little pressure on me, but they're expecting that spirit's going to show up, and then I'm going to be able to deliver, and connect them with their loved ones. So, I think there's usually a couple moments in a reading where, some information comes through and it's like, okay, wow, you're not supposed to know that, and that's great. And I think it's great just because it kind of increases the impact of what's coming through when they know, yeah, there's no way that Stopher could have known this, and so this is definitely my loved one coming through. So, but overall, I feel like they're ready. They're ready to hear it, and they're expecting it.
Yeah. Anything frighten you with doing this work? Anything kind of surprise you or frighten you at times?
I've never been scared by spirit. Things freak me out just because it never ceases to amaze me, the way that spirit communicates and the fact that we can communicate. I mean, it blows my mind every single time. I will say that sometimes when I feel energy that's a little challenged, especially maybe when somebody was in a really depressed state or in a troubled state, maybe dealing with some substance abuse or maybe took their own life, if they were responsible for their own passing, some of that I can take that on in a very it's pretty intense. So, that, and I guess its own way is kind of scary, not in a frightening way, but just in because those aren't emotions that I've necessarily felt a lot in my life. But to feel that kind of despair and take that on is kind of intense.
Now, do you feel from the spirits that kind of come through that way, they've taken their own life? Do you feel a lot of sense of remorse, guilt for what they did do for taking their own life?
Not really. So my experience with communicating with spirit is once they cross over, all those human emotions of guilt and sadness and all that are I can literally feel the release, because they like to show me that, because that's a message they like their loved ones to know, that, hey, I was in a bad spot when I was here, even if it's physical pain, somebody that's dying of cancer. They want you to know that it's like a very important message for them to tell their loved ones and they'll show me this. Hey, once it happened, once I crossed over, it's all gone. And it's a peaceful feeling. I don't feel pain. I don't feel regret. They do know that we still understand things that way. So they will give messages of, I always say their version of an apology or their version, because they know that we need to hear those human emotions, but spirit doesn't attach the same understandings to those things.
And I think there's a lot of people out there that are fearing perhaps things they've done in this life, that some sort of judgment awaits them, that, maybe, that they're going to be judged upon what they've done, and perhaps they're afraid of crossing over because of that. Do you have people talk to you about that? And or do you get the sense that all of that is really just what we think of it on this side, and it really is not experienced over there?
A little bit of all that. I think I almost think of it as lessons. And I know you're interested in like past lives and stuff like that. So I do think that a lot of us have reincarnated from a previous life here, or at least one previous life. And I think a lot of these things that we may have done in a previous life um, are lessons we have to, in one way or another, kind of learn or understand from a different perspective in the future life, right? So I guess that's kind of maybe how it could carry on. I mean, I don't really know, but in my own experience, because I do know a past life of mine, and the things that I did in that past life, which weren't great, manifested in ways that did cause me some trauma here.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've heard that as well, that kind of people carry that baggage from one life to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you have a phobia or a fear or something, and perhaps that's something you had in a previous life. What about this idea? Does spirit ever talk to you about kind of what happens when they cross over? If you've looked at near-death experiences, there's a lot of people that talk about a life review. Has any of that come across to you?
I've never felt any messages about the life review. I do get messages. They usually like to specifically call out who was there, um, to kind of, because I almost feel like that was like the steward. It's usually like a steward of the family. It's usually somebody that's very like a patriarch or matriarch of the family. So they usually will tell me who was there. And that's a very healing message as well for the sitter, because they usually know that person, and they like to know that they had a familiar face there to kind of usher them in. And then I do get this sense, because I've communicated with spirit that has crossed recently. Maybe it was like a few days or something before, and I get the sense, I don't know exactly what it is, but it feels like almost like an orientation or a check-in kind of period. Because I feel like they've got a transition, and I think for us we'd probably relate it to like days, but for them, of course, time is different. But I get this sense that they kind of have a transition period, almost like an orientation or checking in to heaven, right? So I have been given messages about that. I don't know about the life review or exactly. I've never got messages about exactly how that goes, but um, there's definitely some kind of like transitional period.
Yeah, you get a lot, and of course, I'm going to go back to the paranormal. This is a show
Yeah.
that covers the paranormal. You see a lot of shows on TV that really play on the demonic and the evil kind of side, the dark side of the paranormal. And kind of, what's your sense on that? Are there demons? Have you had any experience with any of that kind of energy?
That's I'm going to give you a whole lot of I don't know on that. I will say this: the worst energy I've ever experienced has come from another human being. So, um, when I speak to spirit or have dealt with energies that aren't in human form, they've always been a pleasant experience, or an experience where I feel like I'm in control, and I can either connect with it or release it. Um, it's sometimes the human energy that might feel a little, and I'm not saying that they're possessed, but I guess where I'm getting with it is I think it manifests, and it's almost like how we project it, to a degree. So I don't have a lot of experience with that, and I don't know a lot about it, but I guess I'd like to think that no, there's not demons. I've never ran into any kind of energy that feels like it comes from a bad place like that. I've had energy that feels conflicted and feels dark, um, but it doesn't feel evil.
And it's kind of reassuring when I hear that, because I've been doing paranormal investigating for a number of years, and I've never experienced anything like that either.
Good.
It's often been a positive experience. I'm not going to say I haven't been frightened at times, just because something kind of catches you off guard. But yeah, it's never been anything that I could say was demonic or dark or anything like that. But
Hmm.
you do hear a lot about that on some of the TV shows, and people talking on TV about their experiences in some of these shows. So yeah, I just always like to kind of get, whenever I'm talking with someone who's involved in the kind of work you're in, kind of your perspective on that. So yeah, thanks for that. I know we're kind of getting short on time here, Stopher. Anything about, are you able to communicate, or feel like you've actually made connection with pets, animals that passed on?
Yeah, I love connecting with animals. It's something that kind of happened, I kind of really had to develop and learn what, human spirit felt like. And then animals started to kind of like trickle in, and it's interesting because I usually feel like they're a child first. When they come in, because they give me that sense of my sitter was responsible for them. And so immediately I'm feeling the energy a little lower as far as like where they sit in the, I guess on the totem pole is like, okay, this was a child. And then once I connect with it being an animal or a pet, I get such a sense of joy, and I usually will laugh out loud because it's just so, their energy comes through so like unassuming and so like childlike and joyous and appreciative, just because of kind of what the relationship was. And so those are my favorite readings, and I feel like the sitter gets the most out of those, even more so when, like, say, a parent comes through or something like that. It's like we're so connected to the energy of our animals. It's almost hard to like understand. But yeah, I love connecting people with their pets.
Yeah, that's interesting, and you always wonder if they're kind of, even after they pass on, if they're still trying to connect with us, just like perhaps deceased family members and such are.
Yeah, I did a pet reading the other day, and the dog came through, and I didn't quite understand the message, but the message was about moving a bed, and initially I thought the dog was still alive, and I was like, the dog doesn't like it when you move the bed around, and they feel very uncomfortable. And she says, well, the dog's passed, and she says, and I did, just after she passed, I moved the bed. And I said, okay, well, she's still there. So they have a sense of humor as well, but they do want us to know that they're still there. I've got 3 or 4 dogs in spirit, and I before every reading, I call them in. I'm like, hey, will you help?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I talk to them too.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. Well, Stopher, if somebody wants to connect with you, do a reading, find out more about you and what you do, where do they find out information?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website, which is stophercavins.com. And then you can set up a reading. You can message me if you have any questions about it. I'm pretty open with my phone numbers on there. Text me. Like I say, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. And then if you want to get me on Instagram, it's at Psychic Stopher. And yeah, that's the best way to communicate with me.
And how about the free session that you mentioned for people? Anybody may be interested in that. Can you just remind us on that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because that's kind of a passion project of mine. I love helping other mediums and psychics develop. So it's called Level Up. It's a mediumship mastery circle, 100% free. That's on. It's normally on Tuesday evenings. Now for October, since I have another thing going on, and I don't know when this is going to air, but in October it's going to be on Wednesdays. But it's normally on Tuesday evenings, 6 p.m. Pacific time. And if you go to my website, there's an education tab, and then you'll see it under there. There's a link where you can go straight to it on Tuesdays, and it's on Zoom. Right. So,
all right, great. Well, hey, thank you so much for spending the time with me tonight, Stopher. I really appreciate it. A great discussion, and best of luck to you in all your future work.
You are welcome, my friend, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great night.